let's say, a basic flavor of events which establish more or less that, well, on the one part, there's this religious connotation of the ramifications or implications of improprieties of many systems, and yet no fact of absolute solution ever emerged out of the difficulties. And, you know, getting back closer to present history, it strikes me, I often wonder, it seems to me that Thomas Jefferson, first and foremost, Abraham Lincoln, secondly, and other men such as James Madison, all of whom spoke quite profoundly about, let's say, the developing principles of monetization. It's often a great curiosity to me that somehow they never resolved the iniquities that they perceived into a fact of solution. And probably, I think, Benjamin Franklin's paper, A Modest Inquiry into the Nature and Necessity of a Paper Currency, is a great example of that, because as I read it when I discovered it, you know, I was on the edge of my seat, so to speak, you know, rocking back and forth in my chair, and I'm thinking, my God, why can't you ask the next question? Because there is a question that resolves this issue. Why can't you ask it? It's so easy to answer, you know. And I marvel that so many people of such marvelous stature and intelligence nonetheless cut themselves short somehow of developing their perceptions into solution, even as they saw an obvious need for solution. In the case of Franklin, for instance, we can develop the question right off the top of our head. If he noted that the colonial economy in Pennsylvania benefited from increases in paper circulation, then we should ask, you know, I mean, anytime a proposition, and particularly a mathematic proposition, is cast our way, how do we determine that it is valid or not? We put it to the test. The first thing we ask about a possible range of values is, what is the upper limit of the range, and what is the lower limit of the range, and what is the exact amount it may best be governed to be. And so in the case of this proposition that the Pennsylvania colony benefited from an increase in circulation, the questions we should ask is, well, what's the upper limit of the circulation? He postulates very roughly that an increase in circulation would have been beneficial, but too much would be adverse, And too little would be, to use just any general word which works, encumbering. And so a question should, or a set of questions, should be devised immediately to answer this, because he's obviously pondering an issue which would benefit all humanity if a solution was realized. So we ask, what would be too much solution? And we evaluate prospective possibilities. Start with the proposition of infinity, for instance. Well, it would seem obvious that infinity couldn't possibly even exist, because what would we have issued money for? And if everyone had so much money as infinity, why would anyone produce? It's only when we need to procure further production than what we have so far that we produce further so that we can trade for production. And what does that mean? That means itself that the volume of circulation can only equal the remaining value of production if it's representative at all. And so immediately we basically realize another issue, and that is that, well, if that's the case, then what is money? We all perceive it to be a tokenization of value, but if its volume changes inappropriately somehow, that has a proportional capacity to affect its relative value. So what is the proportion that we're after, and what is the nature of money that we're after? We bring in another question, and all of these things naturally lead to the same answer. No matter where you start in this thing and where you dive into it, it all leads to the same answer, because then you start thinking, okay, so what is the nature of money? And you may not even have a refined idea to begin with, but you can examine every possible manifestation or implementation of a definition of money. And when you do this for not very long even, you realize that any form of money which is mutable, which can change, can damage someone. So, if the value of money increases, then property holders are offended. If the value of money decreases, then the opposite happens. So we realize that if we're to have a just money, our very, very first rule for what money must be is that it must be an immutable token of value if it's to inflict no injustice whatsoever on anyone. Then we realize further that if there is an insufficient circulation to represent all wealth, that there's one particular instance which is a prospective case of trade which could never be performed, and that is that all wealth couldn't be traded all at once. Well, to a person who doesn't take these principles seriously, that may not seem like such a great offense, but it has tremendous and even devastating ramifications. How can we understand that? We make a model of it. And let's make a model of it. Let's suppose there's 1,000 of us, and we're all in a circle. And every day we produce something which is worth $10. And to begin this model, we all have $10. Somehow it doesn't matter at this point, because that's not what we're not illustrating anything but the ramifications of a potentially deficient circulation. So if each of us had $10 and every day each of us produced $10 worth of whatever it is that we produce, and at the end of the day we turn to the person on our left who sought to purchase our production from us. For the $10 that they have, our production would be transferred to them. Their $10 would be transferred to us, and likewise we would be consuming the production of the person on our right, which would be transferred to us, and our $10 would have been transferred to them. So long as there is the money in circulation to represent all of this production and consumption every day, then the entire system of production can be readily exchanged at any moment or conclusion of any period, such as our model day. But now, if we go around this circle of 1,000 people, and in the case of every fifth person, we remove $5 from them, such as for the prospective reason that they might have paid interest for our promissory obligations to each other, we can readily see what happens. Beginning at person 1, we go 5 people. The first 4 transactions can be affected, but when it gets to the 5th person, the transaction cannot be had, nor can the one after it ensue. In fact, the 5th transaction cannot be executed until that person then goes about the circle and earns from someone else the $5 that that has been taken from them, so that they can complete the very next transaction. And so this happens in every 5th person, and of course around a circle of 1,000 people. It takes far more than a day for all of these voids or nullifications of the necessary volume of the circulation to be fulfilled, so that the former commerce, which was sustainable only by a system of unexploited immutable tokens of value, was readily conveyed. So this example itself illustrates the principle that the only sufficient circulation which can inflict no injustice at all itself is equal and capable of representing all the remaining value of all production at all times. So in those few questions alone, Franklin could have answered this paper, finished this paper, Modest Inquiry into the Nature and Necessity of a Paper Currency could have become an absolute inquiry and resolution of the nature and necessity of a paper currency. In a few minutes, it could have become a completely different thing. And in just these few questions, we've resolved everything but the necessary and indispensable life cycle of a promissory obligation. And that is that as every immutable token of value then must represent the very property for which it is issued, its life cycle must itself parallel the life cycle of the represented property, and therefore the inherent and necessary nature of a promissory obligation must be to pay the principal out of circulation or retire it as the represented